Chapter 14. The Experiments. A burst of sun beamed through the room, flaring through the door like an astronomical flashlight. My eyes boiled at the sight of it, as the blinding globe took me by surprise. Fighting through the wave of fluorescent bullets, I followed the stranger to the exit, hurtling through the gauntlet of trash that booby-trapped the floor. "Watch your step. I think you're going to enjoy this," he exclaimed, full of glee as I joined him. Through the entrance was an extravagantly woven deck, composed of crimson lumber meshed neatly together. On the shaded floor was crisp rain, glittering lavishly in the air, waiting for the orange blaze to consume its soul. The old man and I strolled over to the banister and rested our arm on the damp, coiled structure. As I peered off into an empty sky, an odd sensation plummeted on top of my head. Drips of frosted rain speared onto the floor. As I looked upward, I found out just why. Above me was a sea of branches that circled around an emerald crown. They danced with the wind and cried blissful tears, glowing with life as the sun hugged the massive flower's jade petals. The heavy breeze whipped against my skin, pushing me back several feet as I nearly tumbled to the ground. The old man cackled with laughter. "Oh, you get used to it, my friend. I envy the opportunity of experiencing this sight with fresh eyes." I rushed back towards the banister and peered below, nearly fainting at the portrait that emerged. The wooden city stood hundreds of feet beneath us, barely visible amongst a desert of ivory clouds. As I swirled my head around, I could spot landmarks stretched across the entire island, places I've yet to encounter. "Where am I?" I asked, absorbed in the wonder that lied beyond. "It's about time you asked that question. Welcome to my home, Walter," said the man proudly. "Your home," I repeated, worried he made a mistake. "Well, yes. I don't think there's another name I could call it. My creations built this place for me, within the bark of the island's tallest tree. It was a gift, an opportunity to live amongst my children, distant, as you can see, but always watching. I think they take comfort in that," he replied, very pleased with himself. After a while, he continued, "I've called this place home for over 40 years, perhaps even more. Time seems to fade together here. Every day similar to the last, a never-ending loop of continuity." "That seems awful," I exclaimed. "Awful? No, not in the slightest. Tormenting our bodies and psyches to constantly adapt to change. Now that is truly awful. Look at animals in the wild. They don't purposely shift from place to place unless they have to. Over time they construct a nest or haven. In that haven they preserve a level of solace so many of us desire, and yet never have the patience to achieve. Walter, we're told to alter ourselves in the way of progress, earn capital or power to become content in our lives. It's a farce. Put yourself on any cycle. Eventually that comfort will come. Stray from that pattern and stress will arise, an unavoidable fault in our nature. Also known as Stockholm Syndrome. I have a few friends who could diagnose you if you'd like," I replied. "An empty label that shames a sage human cognitive process. There's no shame in it, condemning how our minds work. Your friends might diagnose me, but they will confuse their diagnosis with a problem. Something that they should fix or numb, whether that be through one-on-one hypnosis or medication. Consider this, Walter. Maybe our brains' complex mechanisms are into issues that need to be manipulated or deleted. Maybe they are the solutions." The truth is, I have considered that before, but reinforcing his philosophical blabbering was not something I desired. I could find those answers inside of a cardboard cookie in most Asian restaurants. This man's unoriginal fluff was no more desirable than a delve down Gregory's dilapidated brain. The two men appeared to live on two ends of a spectrum, and yet to me they were very similar. Men who thought they knew it all, their greatest weakness. There's no more value in knowing something than when you have to know what you don't know, as opposed to what you know. It seemed the doctor was just another closed mind I'd have to crack open. "Is this what you wanted to show me?" I asked, confused as how Sky could answer my multitude of questions festering inside of me. "Let us take a walk," he replied, as he then started strolling alongside the deck. Our leisurely saunter continued down a winding wooden staircase that was engraved, looping around the thick husk. We swirled down several flights, both of us growing tired as we dove countless feet. Now one with the clouds, nearly at the halfway point of the tower. Again another deck appeared, like the one a mile above us, finely crafted from the bark of a redwood tree. Nailed against the timber skin was an entryway, a butterscotch-glazed portal, immensely wide and stained dark from the strokes of time. The old man's puckered fist thumped against the door, a thunderous crack that left a mark on the golden paneling. His head went back towards me, and smiled while we waited. The floor beneath me shook as a being approached to answer a man's calls. A hand delicately pried the door open and froze. Zeta stood before us, muddled and still. He then plummeted to his knees and bowed. "Rise," said the stranger, softly but stern, commanding the giant lying before him. "Father, I did not know. I was tricked." The old man cut off Zeta's words with the lift of one of his fingers. "I did not ask you to speak," he said, while walking around the beast's room. The devil's dormitory was hardly what I expected. On the walls were paintings, weathered canvases with sloppy designs and images, far from dazzling pieces of work, but jarringly vibrant and peculiar. I quite admired them. His space was about the width of a college dorm room, while his roof was absurdly high, crammed and unorganized, his bed being an enormous rope hammock that was strapped and hung by 4 dead tree trunks. He, too, had a makeshift desk in the form of a grizzled peach table, littered with food and jugs of water. Unlike the stranger, countless windows appeared on the walls, funneling in droves of daylight. "Walter, of all the work I've done in my career, Zeta stands alone. A unique individual, one who's impossible to replicate or compare. He was a challenge I couldn't prepare for, but through devotion and fortitude, he was born. My masterpiece." I was cautious to laugh or smile. My pain was still blistering, and the source was standing 7 feet tall, right next to me. The man's masterpiece was an asshole, and he appeared too warped to even realize. "With all due respect, your friend nearly bludgeoned me to death. He's an unbalanced brute, far from a work of art," I exclaimed, doing my best to temper my malice. 2 aged eyes squinted towards me, gazing up and down in my face, as if he needed a reminder of the black welt on my forehead. "Ah, that's right, Walter, and we are very sorry about that, aren't we, Zeta?" said the man as he nudged scraps of food off the table and sat. "Yes, father," replied Zeta. The stranger shook his head. "I'm afraid that's not enough. Considering he's standing right there, I'm not so sure you're going to have a better opportunity than now. Apologize, Zeta." Zeta looked down at me and sullenly said, "I'm sorry, Walter," with his profoundly deep voice. "Very good, Zeta. Now tell me, what is Walter?" continued the man as he cheerfully looked on. "Walter is friend," stated Zeta, lifeless and empty while doing so. Across the room the man clapped in excitement. "Extraordinary, isn't he? Highly obedient, just like the others. Teaching him was a slog, but you can see it was done with reward. He'll answer anything and he'll do anything I say, like a loyal dog. Zeta? What's this man's name? I asked, cutting off the 80-year-old raisin's boast. Dr. Oscar, replied Zeta. My eyes flashed back at the stranger, whose hand was covering his mouth while he laughed. Oh, too distracted by my own stories to even introduce myself. How silly of me. To be fair, it's been a while since I've talked to another human face to face, so forgive me for glossing over common courtesy. Like Zeta said, my name is Dr. Oscar. Atticus Oscar, to be exact. Hello, Atticus, I replied, as I strolled around the room, observing the art gallery. So, now that everyone is formally acquainted, I think we can start, said the doctor, who drew a scowl from the Titan. Start what? Asked the booming voice. The birth of your species, my child, the birth of our city, the old man replied. Zeta's scowl sheened into a grin, as he plopped to the floor and gawked at the man in wonder. It was as if he was about to listen to an old fairy tale, as Zeta was starry-eyed and eager. Like I stated before, our goal was to combine genes and attributes of animals around the globe to create the perfect creature. While I think I've done that and adore my work, I'd be lying if I said it came about swiftly. Our early attempts were grievous, creating a compatible egg and sperm using traits from primates, canines, and so forth was nearly impossible. Countless hours were spent mixing and matching genes, and not one successful zygote was formed. Following a breakthrough, we finally produced several subjects who were implanted and born within the wombs of apes. The rare few who were not stillborn were exactly what we wanted. Fully formed eyes, ears, fingernails, beating heart, the works. So what was the issue? I interjected. Athena. The firstborn lasted 3 hours. Zeus, born a day later, lasted a week. Their entire lives were spent in a lab, with wires and electricity pumping their hearts and keeping them alive. They were machines, not the gods we expected, answered Dr. Oscar. Zeta appeared slightly hurt by the fact that he wasn't considered a god, rolling his eyes at the comment until the doctor glared at him to behave. At once his annoyance was transformed back into wonder. As I walked along the giant's home, I noticed that the seemingly arbitrary pictures were not arbitrary in the slightest. Caricatures of the city's walls, trees, and sky were depicted with brash, eccentric strokes. They were like our children. We made them, delivered them, and loved them. Years of our life were spent developing our creations, and fruits of our labor were just killed. Almost our entire budget vanished the second their hearts stopped beating. My wife and I left the project, including our leader. I remember him saying he was wasting his time playing God, and so they left us. Understaffed and depleted, still holding our children's carcasses in our hands as we fought off tears. He exhaled, appearing angered and resentful at the mere thought of his former companions. He then cleared his throat and smiled. Despite this, our sources never stopped flowing. I was promoted to lead our expedition and did what my previous superiors feared. I introduced the human genome into our equation and went forth with another fertilization, splicing cells from myself and my partner's own body to test just how far our work can go. We tempered our expectations, expecting another premature illness, riddled infant. You see, Walter, they were no longer gods in our eyes, simply scientific experiments, exactly how they should have been considered. After some time went by, our work culminated into something we could never have expected. Twins. Alpha and Beta, Zeta proudly exclaimed. That's right, said Dr. Oscar, joyous as ever. They were your grandparents, our first success. healthy babies that looked very similar to the creations who are alive today. I was never more proud, but I knew my work wasn't done. I raised them primarily in our facilities, making sure they weren't exposed to the island's world, the predators that lingered in the jungle and risk of sickness. I just couldn't roll the dice with their lives. They were my last hope, after all. My supervisors wouldn't allow another slip-up. "You're lucky you had your wife there to help," I replied, as I gazed at a painting of a waterfall. Sapphire ink bristled from the canvas, taking me back to the days of old. The second his wife is mentioned, though, the doctor stopped speaking, his marathon of words coming to a crashing halt, as his head seeped downward. "Is there something wrong?" I asked, as his eyes grew heavy. "She died," stated Zeta, callous as ever. "Right again, Zeta. She died," repeated the doctor, his words slow, almost mute. "We needed another human surrogate for our study and found no volunteers. My wife was determined to see our work through and jumped at the opportunity to birth the next part of history. My hesitance was drowned in her excitement, so of course I agreed. She died during childbirth." "Didn't she?" I asked, floored he would even attempt such a monstrosity. He nodded. In an effort to appear kind, I offered my condolences, but he seemed disinterested. Instead, he soldiered on, discussing with me the vast amounts of tests he completed with the twins. Both of his creatures scored remarkably high for intelligence, motor functioning, and physical fitness. Eventually, he taught them how to read, speak, and draw. It was tragic, the way he described them. They were the children his wife never gave him, and he was the father that never was. Despite this, as he spoke he seemed cathartic, as if he was reliving the best years of his life, the images flashing through his eyes while he talked to us. "Whatever happened to them?" I asked. "Following adolescence, I introduced them to the island, a bountiful environment where they could play and grow. I thought they'd thrive here, build their own society. Instead, they fell ill, not able to cope with the bacteria or viruses our world offered. I had been too protective over them, treating them like rats in a cage. It was an oversight I did not replicate with Alpha's child, the matriarch to all the citizens who preside in Zeta's city. I, too, had to raise her, as both of my subjects passed away far too young, falling victim to common fevers and pneumonia. Gamma was different. When she was born, I knew exactly how to raise her. Ingratiate her into the jungle, make her breathe its fumes, and grow with the growing and sprouting life that preserved its grime. She became the queen of the island, the sole infallible godsend in a world of miscalculations. I needed to protect that. And so I focused all of my efforts on producing medication and antidotes to combat the treachery that consumed her mother. Luckily, she never needed them. She was immune to its vile, distinctly human, expressing empathy and kindness unlike any animal I've ever encountered. A sight to behold, Walter. Bright green eyes that held a pureness you can never even fathom. It's beyond description, a vision so rare that if you saw it, you wouldn't know what to do with yourself. The truth was, I had seen it before. It was a feeling I got with Darwin, the indescribable simplicity. If the doctor had the ability to create a creature of his nature on a wide scale, then he'd be on the brink of something special. Despite this, all the man's work was put to waste if his great vision was shadowed in the dark. If kept hidden, there would be nothing left to see. Then show me. Show me the world. Get off this toxic island and spread what you've made. I exclaimed. They're not quite ready. I need them to be perfect. The second they're shown, there's no going back. My legacy will be cemented, and all this time and energy I've poured into it would be rendered a waste. I could have done thousands of other things with the hours I've spent, but I did this and I did it for a reason. If people can understand that reason and see what I see, then I failed. And I can't fail, Walter. You created an entire species. I doubt your legacy would be tainted if there are a few blemishes. I've made Zeta and Gamma. If they were the only ones shown, I'd be perfectly content. The issue lies with the others. The intelligent creations are far too stubborn and independent. Zeta's kin is too foolish, albeit a loyal and obedient bunch. Over time, the two virtues can blend together, but I fear not in my lifetime. And the cost to get that point has already drained far more than you can even imagine from me, spilled the old man, his exuberance and luster crumbling, while the fatigue oozed out of him. Our experiments have cost the lives of not only animals, but species. We have caused the extinction of far too many for the world to not cause an uproar, most importantly to make some of our more human creations. A life had to pay the price, and that won't go unnoticed. Now, I won't deny that when early tests showed Gamma thriving, our supervisors acted quickly. They took her and extracted a possible cure from her genes. They thought her extreme bill of health could be replicated on a wide scale. They thought it could revolutionize the medical industry, and so we scattered participants around the globe and fed them our anecdote. Can you guess what happened? They died, I replied, noticing a common thread attached to each project. Some slow, some quick, but almost all the same. Death. We tested 40 subjects, all scattered in remote countries exposed to an identical illness. We offered a free experimental solution, and they were all ideal participants. They lived in places where they can be silent and take part without the eyes of the media watching. Each were exposed and treated using the same vial we extracted from Gamma. 3 were cured of their disease. The rest meant violent ends. If our work was told to the public, it would be natural for them to check our findings from its cradle onward. That would involve our early failures that would lead to our imprisonment and destruction of our studies. I was starting to understand the need for a close-knit security. If too many eyes were watching this project, it would have already been shut down. Perhaps it should have been. Perhaps the doctor knew this fact, but was far too down the rabbit hole to crawl back up. My excursion around the room ended at a depiction of one of the creations. It was female, in its arms, and the legs the color of sand. Thin, streaky hair falling from her head, wiry like uncooked spaghetti bathed in milk chocolate. At the center of her face were 2 olive circles. The portrait was becoming clear. Ah, this is Gamma, I stated, as the doctor hovered above my shoulder. A faint rendition, but yes, said the doctor. Where is she? I asked. Zeta? Earmuffs, he replied. 2 meaty talons clapped over the monster's ears as he closed his eyes. Gamma is gone. She ran away weeks ago, deep into the jungle. Over time, she grew depressed, distraught by the wars her children fought. She did her best to mediate the bloodshed, but in the end, couldn't cope with the turmoil. We let her go, free to live her life in the jungle she once loved. Hopefully now at peace, exclaimed the doctor, until he smacked his hands against Zeta, signaling the end of the discussion. In an effort to break the silence, the doctor continued. These are Zeta's drawings, believe it or not. Charming attempts at beauty. He's always been a creative character, this one. Aren't you, Zeta? The giant nodded and glared at me. Well done, they're very nice, I said, flustered by the infernal gaze latching onto mine. Again, he nodded. No need to be afraid, Walter. The days of him hurting you are over. Isn't that right? Exclaimed the doctor, while he comedically grabbed the monster by the wrist, standing high on his tippy-toes to do so. Walter is friend, repeated the gargantuan, as he revealed a slight grin. And don't you forget it, bellowed Dr. Oscar in his chipper tone. I don't know about you guys, but I'm feeling a smidge claustrophobic in here. Let's continue our travels into Zeta's fine city. He can give us a tour. It's been far too long since I've walked those streets." "What do you say, old pal? You think that you can do that for us?" asked the doctor. Zeta immediately barged forward and through the door, slamming it open with his brute strength. "I guess that's a yes," said the man as we followed behind. We drifted our way down the steps, the elder statesman having to stop several times to catch his breath. "Let me carry you," pleaded Zeta, as a chorus of gruff coughs sprang in the air. "And let my subjects see me like this. Don't be ludicrous. If you're in such a hurry, feel free to rush ahead. Walter and I can take our time," he replied, his voice throbbing with mucus. In an instant the beast complied, storming down the footholds like a truck full of bricks. "They're your subjects?" I asked, confused how both Zeta and the doctor could both rule. "Well, I don't do the heavy lifting, per se. My grunt does most of the work, but that's only because I give him the capacity to work. I gave him his flesh and bones. I gave him his mind and strength. Without me, there is no him. Without me, they don't exist. I've created them, and I haven't hidden that fact from them. There is no religion for them, Walter. Only facts. Only me. Fact 1, I am their maker. Fact 2, if they fail to comply with me, I'll be their destroyer. Their lives linger on a switch that only I can flicker on and off. They wouldn't dare lose faith in those facts. And if they do, I have Zeta to remind them. It's awfully simple, Walter. Even a group without religion will look for a god, and all they have to do is look up, and they'll see my tower. They will see their god." "A god that uses the devil to do his bidding," I grimaced, curious if the old man could even pick up on that fact. "Calling Zeta as a devil is a grievous miscalculation. It's hard to believe, but he was one of the smallest children Gamma ever had," said the man, as we continued our descent into the clouds. "You're kidding," I replied. "Oh, not in the slightest. Born 2 months early, albino and ghoulish, a complete runt, bullied by all around him and constantly distraught with pain and anger. I would have euthanized him if it wasn't for the cost. He, like his siblings, was an outlandish expense. Instead of flushing him, I viewed him as a unique opportunity. Because of his health, I knew it was unlikely for him to live any longer than a couple of years. There was no harm in trying a few alterations. In my mind raced images of a baby being thrown into a vat of toxic waste. "So you fed him a ton of spinach, right?" I exclaimed. "Oh, that could have worked." Instead, I fed him hyperactive human growth serum and injected him with steroids at the age of 5. Unable to resist the medical inquisition, I never stopped. Similar to my urges, his growing never stopped. He became a hulking titan amongst his siblings, an almighty black sheep. "A black sheep is still a sheep," I mumbled. Our travels were coming to an end as each spindle around the bark brought us closer to Earth. "How come they don't all look like Zeta, then? Surely you could have done the same to all your subjects," I asked. His hands softly patted my back in encouragement. "Very bright, Walt. I would have gone that route if it wasn't for the trade-offs. Cognitively, he has stagnated, intelligent, but unable to use critical thinking. Inside of that large creature is a child who was rejected from all around him, brothers who were more evolved, and sisters who despised him. He couldn't control his aggression, and so he lashed out, striking and clubbing any conflict that arose until there were no conflicts left to fight. Not even Gamma could put reason into him. People feared him, and while he never acquired their love, fear was better than nothing." Minuscule slivers inside of me pitied the feral savage. Teetering along in front of us, his body distorted with lashes and mutilated scars. My sorrow faded as a burning of agony warped my skull. The pain that came and went as it pleased. "Fear. That's all it takes to rule your creations." The decrepit man's face shook vigorously, his porcupine bristles fluttering from his jaw as the wind heaved another blow. Of course not. It doesn't hurt, but it's hardly the only ingredient necessary. Zeta is an outlier in more ways than one. The soldiers he sent to capture you, the ones that walk the streets and patrol our prison, they are his children, the only natural-born children on this island, purebreds thriving in a city of test-tube babies. Zeta has the power not because of his strength or scare tactics. It's because he is the only fertile man we have ever created, the sole source of almost all who roam our metropolis. While it's true that no creation would be alive without me, in a way, they'd have no future without Zeta. Just as the man's sentence fell from his lips, we reached the ground floor, leaping off the steps and onto the lush sod that lied below. Before us was the city square, boisterous and cluttered, inhabited by creatures who were scuttling about, busy and working through the day's heat. Children could be seen in the distance, playing in the puddles, crusted and splotched with mud. A group of soldiers clumped together in the center, sharpening their weapons with fallen stones. In the middle of the assembly was a row of meat carcasses, skinned and pulsating fresh plasma onto the verdant carpet underneath. They hung in the air, sluggishly scorching as the sun microwaved the dead flesh. As we looked on, I noticed several of the children freeze in their footsteps. They were gaping, their eyes goggling as an intense stare fixated on us. The patrol and workers around them took notice and turned towards their gaze. They, too, transformed into statues, ankles locking still as the chattering in the air dissolved into hushed whispers. On cue, they all fell to their knees and bowed. A sight to behold, as their filth-ridden and clammy backs glistened with the golden glow in the sky. "Walter, one day they'll all be yours," exclaimed the doctor as he wandered forward into the flock of docile sheep. Zeta muttered incoherent slurs as he roared ahead, nearly crushing his followers with every stomp of his heels. They remained still and limp as we traveled through the maze of fallen bodies. The subjects did not appear loving or gracious in their offerings of admiration. In truth, they seemed terrified, drenched in sweat and dripping with fear as several trembled on the floor, avoiding eye contact with both Zeta and the doctor at all costs, as if a mere glimpse would render their hearts to fall frozen. Up ahead, I was greeted with the sight of the city in all its glory, basking itself in sunlight while it glittered a glorious glow. No longer strapped to a rush or blinded by the dark, I could finally analyze the craftsmanship, something that could be spotted every time I turned my head. They reminded me of images found in old history books, Aztec-like oddities in the small sets of pyramids that were interconnected with bridges and tunnels. Some houses were even implanted above, extravagant tree houses blanketed in vines that intertwined themselves within the fabric of the structure. Dazzling flowers blossomed from the serpentine cords, smoldering in the atmosphere like Christmas lights blazing on a cold winter's night. The three of us ambled through the city streets for quite some time. Its history and achievements were boasted aloud through the old man's decadent teeth. Each landmark had a story. Each creation had a history. While intrigue often transforms me into a sponge, to be honest, it was impossible for me to grasp the webs and lineages the doctor was crafting. I was too perplexed by the acolytes to even focus. Each person we passed looked upon me as if I was a unicorn, just dumbstruck gapes often reserved for celebrities on the streets. It seems as if they all knew me, and looked at me with love. I knew they all knew the doctor, and they looked at him with terror. It was hardly adding up. Despite this, the doctor was unperturbed, barely even glancing at the bowing subjects. The man was entirely numb to his people, waving them off like cattle. He only seemed interested in Zeta's children, patting warmly atop their snow-sprinkled heads, whispering sweet nothings into their ears, and bellowing jolly laughter while we watched the kids tease each other in horseplay. While the rugrats adored the old man's tricks, their mothers looked on in dread, whisking their kids away from the first chance they could, and tormented as Zeta grilled them from afar. As we ventured deeper into the city, the doctor proudly paraded around his surplus of amenities. Across the land stretched wells for drinking water, pigs and chickens locked away in farms, ponds overflowing with fresh fish and vegetation growing in droves. From the looks of it, a rare few lived the high life within the city. Barracks of soldiers engorging on the island's gifts, plump and thick from nature's juice. Those who flourished were flashed and shown on full display, his charming words beaming, a spotlight atop his favorites, while the sick and frail followed and were ghosts, ignored and met with disgust as Zeta would often bark at them and shove them from our path. I couldn't help but feel as if I was being buttered up, the doctor and Zeta's words empty, like a realtor trying to sell me a run-down home. I sensed an incomplete picture. If their home was truly a utopia, then citizens would have been rioting against their fearless leader. Their god wouldn't be cowering away in a locked tower. Like always, I perked my ears up and wired my brain. There was a flaw hiding in the mist, and if I was vigilant enough, I knew I could find it. "Why are you so thin?" I asked a pair of caramel creations sauntering by, their heads glued to the floor while they peered up at me. "That's rude of you," grunted Zeta, who plucked an apple from a tree and split it in half with the strength of his palms, eliciting a slathering of juice to rocket into the air. "Wrong, Zeta. It's very observant of you, Walter," corrected the doctor, who breathed a heavy sigh of annoyance. "My creations come in all shapes and sizes, Walter. They've grown based on who I've chosen them to be. The frail and withered are that way by design. But do not fear, Mr. Mai. I have supplied these unfortunate souls with medicine to calm their suffering." Again, more questions fired from the answering of a question. "How can you choose what they become? And why would you want them to be sick?" I asked. Zeta's eyes rolled while he chomped away at his fruit. The doctor seemed to take my comments in stride, though, still chuffed as ever. "Stop, my children," the doctor ordered a group of civilians who had been scurrying down an alleyway. The three creatures froze at the order and complied, turning towards the old man and inching closer, dreading every step they were forced to take. At the center was a female, older than the rest, with black hair swinging above her eyes, bangs that covered part of her face, and stringy hair that dangled atop her shoulders. To her sides were two younger females, each pale in complexion, with silver hair that danced down their bodies, checkered with bleak-stained robes that better resembled rags. "Our guest is interested in my work, my darlings. Won't you show him what we've done?" he asked the subjects, with his enchanting call, his voice sweet as honey, and yet the words were met with a sour stare. "You want him to see what you've done?" asked the elder woman, almost surprised with the request. "If you would be so kind," answered the doctor. The female then ripped her garb from her torso and turned around to reveal the bloody truth. Lashings up and down a scar-shredded back. They were like red snakes that slithered within a dark cloud of welts, and bruises pulsed to the surface. Zay then clutched the woman by the back of her neck and drove her to the floor. "Cover yourself, you imbecile!" he croaked, while the two girls shook in fear. "Not what you had in mind," simpered the woman on the ground, who spat onto Zeta's burly feet, an act that bothered the beast, but in all honesty, it was likely the most cleaning the monster had done in a while. "Careful, Theta. We want to show Walter the good we do here in the Citadel, the progress we've made, not the roadblocks that have halted that progress. Now, my child, what trait have you been blessed with?" "I haven't been blessed," she quipped. Before Zeta had a chance to split her head like one of his apples, the doctor held his arm. "The fact that you're not currently wailing on the floor is a true blessing to you, my child. Very well, though. I'll answer my own question." "Please do. I'm curious what the mighty doctor has blessed me with," seethed Theta. "Theta possesses an illness called neutropenia. It's a deficiency within her immune system. Despite this, she's lived a long life thanks to my advances. Blood cells mutated by my hand to keep her little engine pumping away. So yes, my child, your life is a blessing." "But you made me sick," she gruffed. "But I always knew I'd fix you." While there was trial and error in doing so, the results are evident. Your heart still beats because I never stopped drumming. I never quit. And because of our success, Theta, people like Walter will never have to fight the way you have. You already fought for them, and have always learned how to treat it. And your children, well, they're the lucky ones. Almost already finished with their first trials. Such a triumph, bellowed the doctor, who seemed as proud as ever. Come forward, little ones, show me your beautiful faces, he ordered. Both complied, marching slowly while they held each other's hands. Ah, Zana, you're growing taller by the day, he said to the first. And my heavens, I seem to have never met this one. Zeta, her name? The doctor asked the giant. You're Yen Yara, scowled Theta, who looked up at the Goliath in disgust. You can't expect me to learn their names if you hide them from me all the time, remarked Zeta. They're your children. They shouldn't have to learn their names, she replied. Enough of this, interrupted the doctor. These children have both fought off many a virus in their youth, and through it all they've bloomed. I can just tell one day they'll grow to be as strong as their father. Wouldn't that be nice? He asked the two girls. Both sheened forced grins, and then scurried back to their mother, who was growing increasingly upset. Can we go home now? Asked Theta, who clutched her girls close to her hips. Yes, you've been of great help, my child. I won't soon forget it, he answered, his once cheery tone dropping into a harsh howl, his luster falling from his pearly teeth as he already turned to venture to the next attraction. I'm glad you're here, Walter. We have much to discuss, whispered Theta, who scurried back to the alleyways and into the shadows. Magnificent, are they? Laughed the doctor, as we walked along the windy path. She should be locked up, grunted Zeta, who tossed the remains of his fruit into a nearby lake. She's helping cure humanity's diseases. Don't dwell on her hysterics, Zeta. You're better than that. She'd be a complete waste trapped in a cell. The old man's words reminded me of Gregory, who had slipped from the fibers of my mind, effectively proving the old man's distractions were working to perfection. Where do you keep the prisoners? I asked, hoping the answer would lead me to a familiar face, specifically when they're not boiling away in the sun. The old man seemed ruffled. Oh, again I apologize for the mix-up. You shouldn't have never, and I mean never, been placed there. It was a major oversight on my part. The prisoners' quarters are not on the tour, I'm afraid. We purposely sheltered them on the outskirts of our land, far and away from the women and children. There's no need to endanger them, after all. I'd like to see them, I replied, curious if they'd even let me close. A bit out of our way, if I'm being honest. I'm not sure my legs can travel that far anymore. Perhaps another time, he exclaimed. I shook my head. Nope, I'll see them now. Zeta can take me, I stated, loud enough for the entire city block to hear my words. The surrounding guards seemed floored by my request, as if they had never seen another defy their holy tree dweller. Surprisingly, the doctor agreed, beaming a jovial smirk as he spoke. A superb idea, Walt. Zeta, show him the barrels of our city, the grime and filth, an authentic getaway for our special guest. Zeta huffed and puffed and grabbed my shirt as he led me down a new path, beyond agitated while his master's orders echoed loud in the air. Zeta's followers received a front-row seat to the winding up and complacency of the doctor's 500-pound machine. The giant knew that, and stewed in embarrassment. Before you go, make sure to say hi to Delta for me. I don't see him enough these days, and from what I've heard, there won't be many more days for me to see him, yelled the doctor as we drifted away. I stopped Zeta in his tracks, clamping his wrist with my hand while a bolt of anger zipped up my spine. The doctor started to play with me, using what I cared for as ammunition. "I'll be sure to do that," I replied, my lips trembling in disgust. "I do admire the name Darwin, though. I should have thought of that a long time ago. Very fitting," he exclaimed. My head whipped backward at the remark as another bolt sunk through my skin. A poker face was impossible to conjure as my brow sagged low, unable to mask the trouble from my face. "You're wondering how I know his name? And I thought you were clever. Keep in mind, Walter, I control many eyes and ears on this island. More than you'd think. Visit my prisons all you want. Sleep there, eat there, live there for all I care. Just know, if you develop any interesting ideas, I'll be watching you, making sure you're safe." I disregarded the old man's threat and marched forward, determined to shake the island's wonders from the forefront of my brain, replacing the doctor's distractions with something that actually mattered, saving the men who have saved me. Our trail followed alongside a grim path. The dirt growled up at us, jet black and coarse. Like the doctor mentioned, our journey took time, slithering haphazardly through alleyways and marsh. With every footstep we were straying away from the Citadel's epicenter and into isolation. The thought even to the jungle, far and away from any of the subjects to hear my screams. My notion dissipated as I noticed the giant's disdain, unequivocally vexed, an emotion I wouldn't expect from an executioner, ripe with the tightly tethered noose of remote seclusion. "From what I understand, you and Delta don't have the best relationship," I commented, eager to discover the reason for the beast's wrath. Also eager to shatter through the uncomfortable silence. Perhaps all the monster needed was some verbal grease to loosen his tongue. "No relationship," he grunted, as we approached an underground tunnel. It was a hardened burrow that wailed with the sound of rushing water. "That's a shame. I quite like him," I admitted. "Many like him. Delta was a favorite of Doctor. Brilliant and affectionate." "Everything I wasn't," uttered the Titan, his faint words muddled by the stampeding of sumos beside us. Droves of azure ocean funneling through a wooden piping system ingrained beneath our feet. "You must envy him," I replied, volunteering a possible solution, surprised he was giving me anything to play with. "Not envy. His brilliance makes him arrogant. His affection makes him soft. The admiration he receives gives him ears, but not subjects. People only listen to Delta. They do not fear him. He cannot order them, not like I can." "If everyone likes him, why not you?" I asked. "I don't dislike Delta. I hate him. I hate everything he's chosen to be. Rife with jealousy and butchering our laws by returning after exile. Returning with blood on his hands. You've seen it. He killed my son, Oza, named after Doctor. Strong and able, my eldest. I told him to find you, to bring you back from my master. A mission to help skip this silly charade. He agreed. A brave choice to venture into the jungle. His bravery was rewarded with treachery. Scouts tell me he was thrown into the falls, my own son, slaughtered like a pig. Because of my brother's malice and murderous rage, he has returned to our cells to rot and boil like the savage he is." Zeta was bitterly divulging his contempt, careful not to reveal any more information than needed. Despite this, his face told the whole picture. "And the first time, the reason for exile," I pried further, blinders on to the threat of Zeta slapping me into submission. "Ah, the exile," he bellowed, revealing his saffron fangs while he sneered. He tried to become a god, built an army against my sons. He thought he could dethrone Zeta, dethrone the Doctor. He was wrong. He thought he could climb the Doctor's tower and kill him in his sleep. He was wrong. These were dreams, Walter. Like the fool he is, he dreamed, and he failed, said the beast, his head high in triumph. Zeta then slowly traced his finger up and down his stomach, highlighting a slovenly stitched lesion that was freshly etched on his skin, the wound festering into a color that resembled an orchid. He gave me this, slashing my belly with a spear. The infection almost killed me. That's why I couldn't find you myself, why my son had to leave, why he had to die. This scar. He then slapped it with his hand, leaving a mark over the blistered flesh. I'm reminded every day of his strength, his fury. He makes my city unsafe. We must stop him, Walter, all of us, before he takes another son. Tonight I will make sure. Justice will silence his words. Justice will end his reign. His rebellion, and the words he spreads to my sisters, to my brothers, and to my daughters. His vile filth will be left to decompose with his flesh, silenced by the weight of dirt. He has splintered my family and my home, but once he dies, our city will live again, free from the division. And it won't be long, Walter, for tonight that moment will strike. Our city will breathe again as one, unified. The remaining of our journey was done in quiet, raucous elephant stomps being the only exception as we climbed out the tunnel and towards the sullen building, one that was burnt and in complete shambles as the roof was seemingly caved in. Surrounding the shack was a feeble attempt at a wall, as boulders piled together in an unorganized and shoddy fashion. Waiting for us was a dozen or so soldiers from the monster's troop. They were sitting lazily on the structure, like the haughty cocks they were, their legs swinging giddily as their hero approached. "Zeta!" they cheered as we entered the facility's walls. "Where is Delta?" asked Zeta, as he rolled his eyes at their enthusiasm. "He's in the bat," replied a beast, jittery and excited as the words spewed from his mouth. Several of the other soldiers squawked salty sniggers, while one of the beasts mirrored the flapping of wings, snorting bile from his nose while doing so. They were like a band of amateur clowns huddled together spouting $2 jokes. "Did I tell you to use the bat?" asked Zeta, his face cheerless and stern. Consequently, their gaggle of laughs were vacuumed from the air, as the Colossus' beady eyes looked on disappointed. After several seconds of torturous silence, one of them finally mustered enough courage to respond. "Well, no," he slurred through haunted teeth. For a few moments, we baked in tension, until Zeta cracked a demonic smirk. "A pleasant surprise. Thank you, my children," he trumpeted, as he kicked the door of the prison open and entered. From above I could hear triumphant clapping and smacking of the cracked roof, their hands like pounding drums, as Zeta stormed through the back of the room. Inside the shack were 3 large cells. Each concealed box was perpendicular to the other, all circled around a feeble fire pit, as rusted steel entombed each captive. Among them were Kappa, Kai, and a resting Tau, his arms scabbed as puss-ridden as he lied on the wood floor. The 2 able-bodied creatures rose to the dirt and put their heads close against the bars. "Save him!" cried Kappa as I approached his cell. "Silence!" roared Zeta as he plucked a torch from the wall. In one swift motion he lit it and shined the blazing inferno close against Kappa's cell. "I'll burn the rest of you, brother, all of you, until you're as black as the ash that falls from this flame," he screamed, the pounding of hands almost deafening as they rose with the voice of their leader. "Come with me," commanded Gregory. "Come with me," commanded Zeta as he grabbed me by the shirt and trudged his way into another room, flinging a hauntingly cracked door open and smacking it closed with delight, shattering several of its wooden columns in the process. The room before us was seemingly empty. The air was pitch black, the floor lively as rabid rats scuttled below, a foul stench swimming in the air as urine and manure foamed from the floor. "Precious Delta, how far you've fallen," exclaimed Zeta as he lifted the torch towards the sky. I looked above and saw the head of Darwin as he dangled helplessly. His ankles were bound by metal clamps attached to the roof above. His arm was stretched wide as a tortuous steel contraption draped tightly against his torso, a satanic instrument that was riddled with nails and razor blades that stroked against his skin with any ill-fated movement, forcing him to remain still, mirroring an upside-down crucifix. "You say I've fallen, and yet even now I am above you," whimpered Darwin through fits of agony. "Not for long, brother. Soon you'll join the dirt, a fitting end to a false god," raged the Titan, his words echoing in the closed structure. "The only false god here is the one you praise and worship, the one who has warped your mind and taken you for a fool." "A fool who is standing while you hang like a carcass," snapped Zeta. "Is this necessary?" I asked the giant, who danced his hand up and down the fiendish invention. "To fixed loyalty, Walter, everything is necessary," he replied. "Your loyalty has butchered our species, baby brother. Your loyalty has killed your sons. Your loyalty will be your end," croaked Darwin, who sheened a wide smile that glistened with the firelight. Zeta then cracked his hand against the contraption's face and shook it back and forth, nails digging into Darwin's flesh as he swayed into steel. Screams filled the air, while the hammering of hands echoed above. "Zeta, put him down. Put him down right now," I said as drops of blood fell to the floor. "You have no power, human." "Not yet," replied Zeta, as he stared at the hanging victim like a fox stares at legless chickens. "After I visit, the first thing I'll do is walk up to the doctor and tell him about this. All of this. Torturing his $1 million creation. How do you think he would react to that?" I quipped, as Zeta's joyous leer faded to a blank, cold-blooded canvas. He then detached Darwin from his contraption and threw him onto the floor, where he writhed in pain. Following several straining knots, he chained Darwin to the wall with twine as rough as sandpaper. Not until that moment did he finally leave us, bidding us farewell with one final warning. "Enjoy him, Walter. Enjoy his lies and treacheries. Enjoy his final hours. Enjoy ourselves, but leave alone. The doctor will not like any tricks, and neither will I," barked Zeta as he slammed the door shut, leaving us behind to squabble in the dark. "Darwin, I'm so sorry," I pleaded as he trembled on the floor. "Don't fear, human. My pain will leave soon," he exclaimed, while he tried rising to his feet. "Zeta is going to kill you. Tonight," I affirmed, my stomach quarrling while the words left from my mouth. Is he? Replied Darwin, chuckling to himself while he wiggled his leg for circulation. Yes, we have to do something, I blurted, muddled by his reaction. You can't kill me. I'll escape, whispered Darwin as he beamed at me. How are you going to do that? I inquired, suddenly elated by the creation's optimism. He then pointed at me. That's your job, he murmured. My job? So you have absolutely no plan? I shouted through hushed words. Nope, he confessed, and then started tapping his head. You have a big brain. You'll figure it out, said Darwin. For a few seconds I pondered possibilities and then continued. Well, I suppose I could. My words were cut off by a softly blinking light in the upper corner of the room. Before I gave Darwin any potential ideas, I rose from my feet and inspected the odd stimuli. Getting closer to the object ceased to make it any clearer, as a gray, circular object the size of a fist flickered a subtle green fluorescent beam that sprayed through the poorly lit room. The doctor's thread of controllable eyes buzzed in my brain as an idea emerged. Cameras, I thought to myself, and quickly turned back towards Darwin. I worried staring at it too long would reveal my discovery. It doesn't pick up sound, Walter. Do not fear. I've seen those cameras thousands of times. How can you be sure? I asked. The doctor told me all his tricks. Scarlet for sound, green for sight. He may have eyes all around his island, but he lacks ears. His home is too large. Such a shame, beamed Darwin, while he smiled through his pain. As I sat back next to Darwin, I carefully covered my lips, draping my fingers over them as I continued the conversation. The doctor seems to like me. Maybe if I ask him for a favor, he'll let you go. Maybe you can join your mother in the jungle, I suggested, carefully cloaking every word I said. You've met him, stated Darwin, whose tone promptly shifted into an earnest worry. Yeah, he's quite the character. He told me everything, Darwin. About the experiments, the island, all of it. Do you believe him? He asked. Well, Dr. Oscar was very descriptive. He confessed some very personal things to me, things I'd be very hesitant to say. I think he wants me to trust him, and I don't understand why he would lie. Darwin's scarred, bulbous head leaned forward. He tells you lies, so you trust him. Empty lies. I'd never seen Darwin like this before. Relentlessly dour. Is that why you tried to attack him? I asked. The creature appeared deflated, as he kneeled to the floor. You believe him? He has already won, he replied. No. I never said that. I believed him. Zeta told me you tried to overthrow the doctor, that you wanted to be a god, but I've been with you the entire time. I have a decent measure of who you are, and that's obviously not a power-hungry sociopath. I didn't think any of it was true, I exclaimed, hoping it relieved the beast's worries. I tried to change the doctor, tell him why people were turning on him, why they no longer loved him like before. They feared him because of his study, what he was doing to us, mutilating us, panted Darwin. He told me he was just observing everyone, making sure they were safe and protected, fixing their ailments, I replied. At first, but it was no longer true. Over time, he poisoned us, my brothers and sisters, injecting us with a disease, seeing who would live and who would die, paralyzing almost a dozen of our children, eliminating the weak for our city, killing off the old, paving a way for the new, for Zeta and his children to rule the island, free from those who don't want to be ruled. If everyone fears him, then why do they bow? Why not rebel? I asked. They think he's a god, that he can create and kill us at any moment, an almighty power. exclaimed Darwin, as he released a fit of coughs, spitting out blood while doing so. "I tried a rebellion. My brothers helped. We spoke to the sick, told them the doctor's plans, but they did not listen. Too scared. Too weak. To be clear, I did not attack the doctor. He is like a father to me. He raised me. I would have not touched him. Now, well, I don't know what I would do now," said Darwin. "That's not what Zeta says," I argued. "Zeta is a child, blinded by our father. I tried to help Zeta, to protect him from the others, but it wasn't enough. He wants power. He wants to be the successor, next in line after the doctor. After Gamma left, I was next. I would be the king, the god. That is until you came. What do I have to do with anything?" "You have to do with everything," he claimed. "The doctor will offer you what he has offered before. To be his apprentice, to learn by his side how to grow what he has birthed. He thinks you can finish his masterpiece." I don't understand. "Why me?" "Because you are special, Walter," answered Darwin, his bright glow visible through the darkness. "I'm not special," Darwin laughed. "Of course you are. You are one of a kind. I'm really not. Trust me. I'm someone who talks about individuality because I think I lack it. I'm somebody who tries to appear like I have intelligence because I know I lack it. I'm somebody who pretends like I don't care what people think because I know I do. On the surface, I may appear special, and that's by design, because deep down, I'm hollow. I'm empty, and just looking for someone or something to fill it." The creature paused for a moment. His head drooped to the floor. He then attempted to comfort me, but was halted by the binding of rope which clutched his neck like a noose. "Walter, look at me," he exclaimed. "Look at me," he repeated. "Someone once told me, it is the man who does not think he is special who is most special of all." In an instant, I was reverted back to the plane, the start of my undoing, my first leg of my journey. Gregory's piercing pools of blue scanning me while he spouted nonsense and I pretended to listen. Simpler times, and yet that quote emerged. The same words from different mouths. No longer were the days where coincidence could be overlooked. "Who said that?" I asked. "The doctor would always tell me that growing up. It would always make me feel better. Whenever I doubted myself, he never did." And just like that, my suspicions erupted. My heart rate bloomed and my trust splintered in the half. The doctor wasn't lying to me. He knew Gregory. Gregory kept him from me, and I was too dumb to see it. This was before his mind was warped, Walter, before he mangled his creatures like toys and infected their minds. He thinks you would do the same, that you wouldn't care for them. The brilliant Dr. Oscar. My goodness, he couldn't be more wrong. His miscalculation was your heart, the variable he couldn't measure. It is our one saving grace and the trait that makes you special, Walter. All I could do was shake my head as he looked on at me in sorrow. It was my heart that got me hurt, time and time again. It was no blessing, it was truly a curse. It's what made Gregory's betrayal sting like no other I've ever felt before. Walter, I once thought I could wait. Wait until the old man passed and I could lead us away from his treachery. But if I waited, more people would die. My sisters and brothers would all vanquish. Once they die, I'd be alone with Zeta, the giant and his band of sons. They'd destroy all of us. And if you follow the doctor, they'll destroy you too, conceded Darwin as he glared at me. He was left analyzing my face for any clues. Sherlock Holmes wasn't needed to decipher my uneasiness. A blind man could see how anxious I was looking. So if I try to leave, the doctor will kill me. If I try to stay, Zeta will kill me. So what's the point? There's no reason to fight. There's nothing I can do, I said, coming to grips with my inevitable fate. Nothing you can do. Nothing I can do. But together, we could massacre them. We could build an army. With the doctor blinded by his faith in you, by the hands of my brothers and sisters, by the hatred of the infected, all of them. They're on my side. I just need to be freed, to visit the infirmaries and rally my people. And with your help, it can work. The creature was whispering a war cry into my ears, likely thinking it would ignite a fire under me. In truth, it horrified me. Look, I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be thrown into the middle of a goddamn war. I can't just flip a switch and just adapt to every walking thin thing this island throws at me. It's terrifying, Darwin. I can't sleep anymore. I can't think anymore. And I can't trust anyone. I'm sorry, I can't do this. It's impossible. Darwin then held his hand up and grinned. For months, Dr. Oscar tried to train me, to teach me how to fly. Every day, we would walk to his creation's nest. I would try to mount his eagle every day and let it glide me into the air. A deadly wail of a bird that tormented me every day. I would dream about its talons and eyes every night, and every time I tried to fly the beast, I failed. It's because I was afraid of it. After a while, the doctor finally let me quit. Even though he didn't want to, he gave up on me. I gave up on myself. Then one day I climb a mountain with you by my side, my friend. Now, I'm no longer afraid. I wanted to protect you, and so I leapt towards it, latched onto its neck, and flew, because I wasn't afraid. Look, Walter, tonight they're going to kill me. There's no help in fearing death because it's already coming. For me and for you. So why not fight it? Why not let fear and put it aside and at least try? I patted Darwin on the head and climbed to my feet, escaping the storm of rats that were gnawing on my toes. For a moment I considered denying my friend hope, erasing any semblance of a chance from his head, but he had saved my life, and in many respects, he was right. I'll come up with something. I'm not saying it'll be good, but there will definitely be something. No shot I'm going to sit on my hands and watch them kill you. I'm at least going to try, I exclaimed. That's all I ask, he replied, gleaming a bright simper while I left the prison's walls, joining Zeta amongst his pack of loyal dogs. Got everything you needed? Asked the giant. Not quite. I thought you could bring me to Gregory. I have unfinished business with that man. I'd like to see him. A chorus of laughs bubbled in the air. Even Zeta released a throaty chuckle. The human? He inquired. He knew exactly who I was talking about. Yes, the human. The one everyone's been hiding from me. Their chortles grew and grew as my weight carried on. He is dead, Walter, my men finished him off long ago, said Zeta, his children's tittering growing with every word their leader said. It was another lie. I'd even pondered the possibility. I saw Gregory with my own eyes, locked away in a cell. Facts couldn't deceive me, and neither could a simple-minded brute and his gang of dunderheads. Fine, I'll find him myself, I exclaimed, and started storming off. One of the soldiers leaped off the roof and chased me down, clutching my wrist with its claws. Let the human go, Zadie commanded, his gaze ceasing to waver. Look for Gregory, scour the entire city. You won't find him. Once you're done wasting time, please join us. Our ceremony for my brother is tonight at the summit of the river. The end of an era. Walter, I'd be disappointed if you missed it. I left the decrepit prison with my head held high. My way back to the citadel was as twisted and grueling as it traveled from before. Everywhere I walked, the sight of Gregory was ringing in my head. If I could only find him and tell him what I've learned, what I've seen. While I was growing to fear the man he was, I knew Gregory could calm my nerves, to lead me into the direction I needed to go. Detaching from him in the past 24 hours was exhausting, and while my trust was shattered, I hoped and prayed he could help fix the remains. That he was innocent, as foolish as that may have been. Having to face and deal with the doctor and his monsters, handling all those voices in my head, how can anyone cope with that type of stress by themselves? Without Gregory, it was as if part of myself was ripped away. My faint excuse for courage was nowhere to be found, and with zero clues or even a strand of his existence, I hadn't the faintest idea where to start. That is, until I arrived back at the city square. A horde of creatures were circling together, some crying tears of joy, some petrified with horror, as a figure stood tall above the crowd. Dangling from her head were long, streaky blades of bronze hair, her face puckered and pale, with two illuminating emerald eyes shining benevolently upon the assembly's face. Before me stood Gamma, tenacious and glowing in all her glory, her hand raised before the crowd, silencing their shouts and calls. He has arrived, our savior, she announced, as I froze in awe at the wave of creatures that came crashing to their knees. Gamma's hand reached out towards me, as she radiated an angelic smile. Come here, Walter. We need to talk.